I think at this point you can basically feel it, that in this demiurge we're going from the grand architect to the grand artist. The nuance between the architect and the artist is that the architect is, its mythos is pretty much hands off. You get this idea of the architect being separate from his creation, his or her creation. But the architect is structuring the whole thing. The architect knows all of the rules. The architect knows exactly how the game is supposed to go. The architect designed everything. The architect created all the paradoxes, created all of the loopholes, created all of the shortcuts. The architect is the author. So that kind of energy was more of a dominant factor in human history for so long that we very rarely ever got introduced, at least in the Western world, to the other side of the AA battery, right? The plus is the architect, because that was always added. There was always the added idea of the architect, even when it comes down to different secret societies. You have the grand architect in design, and the grand architect as a figurehead, as the apex of a mythos, at the vanguard of divinity for an archetype that represents a particular group's ideal. That was the architect. So you have civilization, but it's still only one side of the battery, so the battery's not going to work only but for so long. So you have societies governing in a certain way with civilizations coming up with a certain style, a certain look. And as you can see, these things fade. That's why the styles of things change, buildings change, safety regulations and standards, different rules and zoning is adjusted. And based on society's use of raw materials, this will also change the entire landscape. In the realm of the architect is very 3D, is very third dimensional. This is also, in a philosophical way, the realm of the realist. The realist, the not so much down to earth, but the realist, the one who's more concrete, more so deterministic, and even, dare I say, nihilistic. All of this is in the realm and in the psyche of the architect. The architect is good for having long range plan, structure, order, and self-sustaining systems. When an architect is good at what he or she does, the building's going to last for a long time. The structures are going to stand the test of time. They're going to stand the weathering. They're going to stand the traffic. They're going to stand the usage. They're going to stand the repair. These structures will be built to last because the care and the attention to detail coming out of the responsibility and the function of the architect is what allows existence itself to govern. So the idea of being a grand architect is a characteristic of godhood. But still, it is only one side of a AA battery. And AA batteries typically go in remotes, and remotes usually control a screen from a distance. So even though we're in this world, we're still looking at this world from a distance. There's still a space, a chasm, a gulf between who we are inside and the world around us. And it's further away than we would like to imagine. But the distance that the architect uses to measure this, to gauge this, can't be seen with only that side of the battery. We need the other A, which is the artist. So when you bring the artist into it, now you're adding color and involvement, and now the designer is a part of his or her design. There's this intimate connection. There's this physical touch. You have this idea of whatever the artist creates, it's coming from his or her body, whether it's their vocals or they're shaping something with their hands. The idea of the art can be compared to the King James translation of art, which is to say thou art, which is to say you are. So art in the Old English King James meaning are, meaning to be, and art being short for artist, these two things are blended. So not only do you have yourself creating a different art or creating a masterpiece, but you yourself are the master, and your masterpiece is simply a projection of you as the master. Your artwork can be seen and experienced in the 3D, but the source of where it's coming from is undoubtedly higher dimensions. You could say the same for the architect, but because of the mere physicality of its expression, the architect's expression, you would say that it is more 3D than what the artist produces. What the artist produces a lot of times can be open to interpretations, whereas an architect is designing a pillar. A wall is a wall, a pillar is a pillar, a floor is a floor, a ceiling is a ceiling. But with an artist, all of these rules can be bent and molded and shaped and reformed and repackaged. You can gain clarity through ambiguity, and ambiguity can be made out of what was once clear in the realm of the artist. So you have this very liquid transmission of ideas in existence and consciousness. You have this fluidity of movement between ideal and perspective and outcome every nanosecond, for as long as your thought forms move and your thought forms gain solidity. You can still find yourself functioning as the artist because you're intimately connected to your creation. If you're going to use the Abrahamic religions of Judaism and Christianity, the architect would be like Father God. God is the creator, the Yahweh Jehovah, who created the demiurge. But then the New Testament, where Jesus Christ comes along, this could be looked at like the artist. So now you have this idea of a person coming from the realm of the architect, but is intimately connected to the design and is moving through the architecture, not just as an architect with a hard hat or just a pad, and not personable, only concerned about whether or not the building functions, but the artist is concerned of the whole structure. Not only that the building functions properly, but that the guests are properly tended to within it. You have this element of hospitality to go with the grand designing of things when you're dealing with the realm and the psyche of the artist. But either way, this is a double A battery, because if you have all art with no structure, which is to say you have the artist without the architect, your art can be aimless and it can cause you to spiral. And these thought forms can jump back onto you and become your very own archetypes and your very own God forms that could work against you. You could have this Edgar Allan Poe type of touch where your work becomes very dark and you may not realize it, but if you're not familiar with dark Kabbalistic energies like Arab Zarak sphere, then these things will take you on a ride unwittingly with depression, and you'll miss all of the signposts that are leading you there. And where your predominant mind is what your circumstances will reflect. So just on the strength of you being an artist, just innocently an artist, just riding the wave, recording the emotion, being what you think is the observer, but because you're intimately connected, the responsibility becomes a little bit greater for the artist. The artist is not the same as the architect. Once the architect is done building, that structure will support itself and govern itself. So that system is in place and it's self-regulating. So the architect doesn't have to factor in himself into his architecture, but That's not the same for the artist. The artist has to factor himself in as well, herself in as well, to go along with the structure. You have to be the host. You have to be personable. Now you have to add this element of hospitality because you're building up two sets of people. And there is two different kinds of building going on with this double A battery that is remote controlling things where you can control anything at any distance. But it starts with controlling the most furthest reaches within you, within your own psyche. So you are this double A battery consisting of both architect and artist. You have the structure, the order, the planning, the intention, the goal setting of the architect. But you also have the fluidity, the trial and error, the experience, the tangibility of the artist. You put these two things together, you get a double A battery. A double A battery goes in a remote control. On this screen of life, you can change the channel, but the battery that controls the remote, that changes the screen of your experience, has to consist of both the architect and the artist, the planner and the improviser. Again, this is Super T Sigma of Sigma Programming. I thank you greatly for your time and attention. You already know reaching is teaching. If it takes 1,000,000 videos to reach 1,000,000 views, so be it. But namaste. Know yourself for yourself. Stay balanced. And in the meantime, continue to vibrate high, people. Peace.